Janitor spots purse behind school locker before learning the unsettling reality. From cramming in the library to illicitly hanging in the hallways, memories of high school will last a lifetime. Some moments, items, and lessons, however, managed to slip through the cracks. In fact, one object remained hidden in a school hallway for decades until it was recently uncovered, and its contents revealed something very unexpected. From September through June of each year, school buildings around the country are packed full of students. Hoover Middle School in North Canton, Ohio was no exception to that rule. Running a school, however, takes plenty of work behind the scenes. While everyone knows that teachers do a great deal for their students every day, custodians don't always receive the same credit. One of those underappreciated workers was Charles Pyle. In May 2019, though, he had a specific task. This would go beyond simply sweeping the floors or changing some light bulbs. As any student can tell you, a locker is an essential part of everyone's day. This time, however, Hoover Middle School's lockers needed a little bit of TLC. Thankfully, Charles was on the case. In one stretch of hallway, there was a particular bank of lockers. The trim, which connected the metal to the wall, had somehow come loose. It needed to be reattached. So began a grand adventure. Nothing was seriously broken, so Charles didn't think it would be a big job. He sized up the situation and got to work. Without breaking a sweat, he had popped the offending piece of metal loose. Now that the trim was completely off, the custodian simply needed to reattach it and get on with his responsibilities. Something, however, caught his eye and stopped him in his tracks. In the dusty space between the locker and wall, there was something red sitting on the floor. While he wasn't sure what he had spotted, Charles fished it out from the crevice. It was a red purse. Clearly, some student had lost her beloved bag and its contents behind that piece of metal locker trim. Surely, Charles thought, she would want her possessions back. Well, when something goes wrong in a school, what happens? You head to the office. Charles picked up his newfound purse and did just that. They were going to get to the bottom of this. While it usually isn't okay to rummage through someone's purse, the school staff decided that this was a special circumstance. They slowly opened the zipper, hoping to find a clue of the owner's identity. Inside the purse, they found several items that belonged to Patty Rumfola. As they dug deeper, though, they encountered a problem. It wouldn't be easy to return this purse after all. Patty wasn't a current student, or someone who had been in the building recently. She graduated from Hoover High School in 1960. Her purse had been lost for nearly 60 years. While Patty hadn't been a student for quite some time, her purse was chock full of stuff. It didn't have a clue to her whereabouts, but it did provide a glimpse into her former life and the things she held dear. First and foremost, there were plenty of school supplies. Patty definitely made sure that she was prepared for class. There was also some makeup and a single stick of beach net chewing gum. That wasn't all Patty was carrying, though. The purse also contained some faded baseball and football schedules and a couple of old ticket stubs. She definitely had plenty of school spirit. With the help of Facebook, the school tried to track down Patty. Eventually, though, they hit an unfortunate dead end. She had passed away 2013 at age 71. There was one silver lining, however. Patty had 5 children, so the school sent them the purse. While it helped them see a side of their mother they never knew, the kids also found something else in the bag. Within the purse, there was a faded teal wallet containing a few coins. While currency might have changed over the years, good luck buying anything for a penny, they still provided an opportunity. Those coins, which were tarnished with time, became a prized possession. Each of her 5 children kept one of the wheat pennies as a token of remembrance of their mom, the school explained in a Facebook post. Though in light of Patty's passing, they quickly followed up with a reminder that you should never pick up any money you find placed in a graveyard. These aren't meant for your piggy bank. They're actually symbols that, for some, are part of the grieving process. Mourners from all walks of life leave mementos at the graves of their loved ones. You'll usually see flowers, photographs, or personal trinkets, though a specific group is behind the mysterious coins. It turns out that the American military is largely responsible for this phenomenon. Theirs is a lifestyle rooted in ritual and tradition, but not all of their ceremonies are born out of official orders. The coins relate to the most difficult time of any soldier's life. Tragically, many veterans know the grief of losing a close friend. Those who make the ultimate sacrifice for their country are laid to rest with the highest respect, though their comrades also honor them in their own way. The coin custom became more widespread during one of the bloodiest and most complicated conflicts in its history. Many believe that coins on gravestones began during the tumultuous Vietnam War. During those 19 violent years, almost 60,000 American service members died. Even back home, the conflict took its toll. During that time, the country was divided in more ways than one. Families struggled with the burden of losing a loved one or having a child being forcibly sent overseas. Because the war seemed so senseless and unending, it was the first time in American history where soldiers weren't welcomed home. Some were actually insulted upon their return. That's where the coin came in. Even military funerals sparked tense conversations about foreign policy, class inequality, and draft dodging, but service members didn't want to lose sight of those who lost their lives overseas. They started placing certain coins on their fellow soldiers' graves. There are various theories as to what this gesture actually means. One theory says that back when they were alive and well, the soldiers used to go out drinking all the time. Coins on the graveyard signify a down payment on the next round at God's bar. But coins and death have also been linked for thousands of years. According to Greek mythology, certain rituals needed to be followed when someone died to help the deceased travel to the next world. But there was a gatekeeper, a ferryman named Charon, and he wasn't cheap. The Greeks placed 2 coins on the eyes of the dead to pay the ferryman, and the superstition soon spread. After all, the consequence of not having enough to pay was being stranded on the river Styx for 100 years. However, some historians point out that a more modern legend may be responsible. One immigrant family nicknamed Black Donnellys also had something to do with the coin tradition. An ordinary family who settled in Ontario, Canada, in the 19th century, they soon became the stuff of legend after getting embroiled in a feud with another clan. The conflict escalated over the years, but it got bloodier than anyone could have imagined. The rivals brutally murdered the entire Donnelly family in 1880. Besides becoming a sensation in the newspapers, locals spread a legend about the victim's gravesite. The myth held that every time someone drops a coin on the Donnellys' burial site, their long-lost wishes from when they were alive become fulfilled. This was likely an extension of the original Greek superstition, but modern-day veterans took the tradition and made it their own. Regardless of the origins, American troops put their own spin on it. Most cemetery coins are placed on Memorial Day, and in addition to paying tribute to the hero buried there, they also reveal something about the person who placed them. Each American coin has a distinct meaning. As the smallest coin in denomination, a penny represents someone who is only marginally familiar with the idea of giving up your life for your nation. So when a 1-cent coin is on a grave, it means that someone outside the military has come to pay respects to a fallen soldier. Then, when you move up in the value of the currency, the meaning gets a little more personal. A nickel on a tombstone, for instance, means that the giver went to boot camp with the fallen soldier. Dimes are the exception to the rule, as they signal a bit more distance between the visitor and the deceased. Putting one of these on a gravestone means that you were in the same regiment. But as you'd expect, the biggest common coin has a powerful significance. Quarters are the rarest coins to find in a cemetery. Only a select few have a right to place them on grave markers. They mean that the giver was present when the soldier died. It's a moving symbol, though you might wonder what happens to these coins. Someone does actually pick them up, though thankfully, it's just the cemetery groundskeeper. These funds are added up and go to worthy causes, usually to the upkeep of these burial grounds or to pay for military funerals. After all, there's a lot that goes into running a cemetery, and most people never think about these issues. Buying a grave plot has to be one of the top items on the list of things most people don't like to think about. As it turns out, however, plots are not the only feature of cemeteries that your average Joe tends to look past. Ultimately, a cemetery is a business just like any other. It needs to attract customers, offset costs, and keep up with the changing times. But as of late, graveyards are having more trouble making money than ever. Just ask Mike Siamaga. The New Yorker started a summer job at Brooklyn's Washington Cemetery decades ago and rose to the position of manager. Now that he's at the top, his organization is running into an unexpected and potentially fatal issue. They've nearly run out of available grave plots, the main revenue driver for any burial ground. Washington has already pushed its boundaries to the limits by squeezing in additional memorials under train tracks and around its offices. Though its recent plot prices surpass $16,000, that high price tag can only keep Mike and his colleagues afloat for so long. Locals continually approach him looking to buy, but Washington simply doesn't have the supply to keep up with the demand. For long-established burial sites like Washington Cemetery, the only answer is to increase density. Rather than sell individual sections of land, they can increase capacity by utilizing more mausoleums. For a more cost-effective measure, burial grounds can also save space through cremations. Of course, this option is completely dependent on the preferences of the deceased. On occasion, graveyards relocate entirely to keep business afloat. They may switch to a larger location, especially if they occupy prime real estate that land developers want to purchase. Nevertheless, many of them are still digging their own graves. According to Forest Lawn Memorial Park Association Chairman John Llewellyn, most cemeteries aren't planning ahead for the future. While they're mandated to put much of their revenue in a long-term savings account, this alone won't keep them alive. Graveyards are indebted to provide a place for the deceased forever. And fortunately, the costs of upkeep also go on for eternity. These businesses have to pay for landscaping and cover taxes, regardless of how many burials happen that month. For some establishments, it's all just too much. The management packs up and leaves the grounds and markers to crumble. Perhaps another party will come in to fix things up, but in many cases, no such rescue ever arrives. By and large, the forecast for traditional graveyards doesn't look good, though that doesn't mean that some locations aren't adapting. Take, for example, this family picnicking between tombs. If you can believe it, the cemetery is encouraging it. This is the new strategy of the Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia. They're aiming to bring burial grounds back to the living by setting aside special time slots for group events, runner happy hours, and yoga classes. Their outlook is not an entirely original one. It harkens back to the Victorian era when architects meant for burying sites to double as public green spaces. Masterpieces like the Mount Auburn Cemetery outside Boston featured the most advanced landscaping ever seen. Laurel Hill took that same approach and updated it for the 21st century. On warm summer evenings, they've taken to hosting movie nights. Other cemeteries, meanwhile, have transformed themselves into literal art spaces. Atlanta's Oakland Cemetery dates back to before the Civil War. Georgians recently came up with a unique way of celebrating its history with the annual Illumin exhibition. Over several nights, an array of lights and displays detail the stories of the inhabitants. This event makes Oakland a more interactive site, morphing it into a place of remembrance and beauty. It also doesn't hurt that Illumin has a cash bar inside the cemetery grounds. A more active programming slate could very well be the salvation for memorial parks everywhere. Nevertheless, they still need to set aside hours for their primary purpose, interring bodies. You don't want to interrupt a funeral with a cocktail party after all. More historical sites have added a full-time moneymaker in the form of gift shops. Fortunately, knickknacks don't cost as much as grave plots, but it couldn't hurt to comfort the bereaved with souvenir mugs and photo books. Ultimately, burial locations may redo their format entirely. Vertical cemeteries, think a high-rise apartment for the dead, have already caught on around the world. Aside from logistics, the funerary industry has a major problem defining its culture. But one group is having a lot of fun with the concept of death.